Okay. We're live. Okay. Hi, Chavi and AJ. Welcome to Intro with Grace.
All right,
Hey,
happy to be here.
thank you
I
for having us.
I was like doing some like, oh my god, what is going on? Sorry. Sorry. Whenever I start live, I promise you guys I'm like not very popular. And like whenever I go live, there's like the 4 phone calls. That's every day. But anyway, um I think like maybe we could start from like the journey of like before prior to AI Collective, because I feel like AI Collective have been like popping up in the past like 1 year. I feel like you guys have accomplished so much. I didn't know that was like a, it's only been like 1 year, I feel like, or like 1 year or a year and a half ish, that you guys already kind of like did so much together. Maybe we could start with like your background before prior entering the entrepreneurship era. So Travis started like a different app, and then I saw that you also like um work at like a lot of different top tech companies. And then
Mhm.
AJ is like so young, like from like profile, I was like, damn. So maybe we could start with like what were you guys doing before the AI Collective initiative, and how did you guys kind of like land it in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I will go first since my history with AI Collective predates you, AJ.
Yep.
My quick background is I've always been a software nerd. I made my parents buy me a book on C++ and taught myself how to code back when I was 12 and got really into building iOS apps because the iPhone had just come out back then. I went to a weird, very nerdy selective magnet high school and ended up building an app to like track my homework because I just had too much of it. It ended up becoming the #1 homework app in the world. So sold it off back when I was early in college, and that was super cool. That really launched my fascination in building software and entrepreneurship and stuff like that. I also got really into building AI models back in high school and decided that's really what I wanted to do. So I went to Apple, worked there for a few years after a whole bunch of preceding internships. I was on the Vision Pro team and on the Apple Intelligence team. And through that, again, to kind of deepen my fascination with AI, ended up starting the AI Collective in the meantime because ChatGPT had just come out and brought together just people that I knew, founders, investors, researchers, to talk about the technology every week. It quickly became the largest and most passionate AI community in San Francisco, and I can go into exactly how that happened and everything. But that's my background up to the AI Collective.
I love that. I didn't know that like you have a fascination. Oh, like I guess like the homework app. It seems like very, like I like the name. It's just literally homework app, and
Now I have an app called Weightlifting app, and it's for tracking my weightlifting.
We use it every single day.
so
Religious user.
I love that. What about AJ? So like, how do you guys kind of like end up together co-founding this
So,
organization?
yeah, great question. Chappy is the founder. I did not come on until much later in the AI Collective journey, and happy to explain why I decided to make my hedge bet on the AI Collective. But I have a pretty non-traditional background. So unlike Chappy, I did not grow up in a cradle next to the GPUs. Chappy is so modest. He's incredibly talented, the most talented person that I've ever met in the space, particularly when it comes to building. And yeah, I share a very different background. So I was actually a professional athlete for the first life of AJ. And I had kind of been groomed into sports. I was an Olympic weightlifter. So my job description was lift heavy things, pick them up, put them down. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I came from a family of professional athletes. Like I thought this was going to be my trajectory forever. I ended up getting a massive injury that left me temporarily paralyzed, had to go through 2 years of rehab. And that's what pushed me into technology. So it kind of broke my spirits to have, be a world-class athlete and then have your health pulled from under the rug. And then I decided, hey, if I'm going to challenge myself, I want to do something that I thought at the time was impossible for me, which was to get into technology. And it's something that I saw, this is around the advent of ChatGPT, and I recognized that we were due for disruption and that AI was going to be the technology that fundamentally changes the world. And I wanted to not be on the sidelines. I didn't want to be a bystander. I wanted to be a participant. So I did something that the world has never seen before, which was B2B SaaS. very original. And it was great. And we ended up scaling the team to have about a team of 50. We were really focused on minority-owned businesses, particularly within the PNW where I'm located. Ended up exiting out of there in 2025, did a little bit of IC work for some major AI enterprise. So I'd done the startup, done enterprise, and ultimately fell in love with the collective. And my story with the collective is I originally started as a volunteer, as a chapter lead. And I remember I had a chat with Chappy and was like, man, at the time, I knew at the time that Chappy was cracked, right? I didn't know to what extent until much later. But my first weekend to the collective, I attended all hands and was like, oh my gosh, there are so many opportunities that exist here. And I was so fascinated. So then slowly but surely, I tried to insert myself into all the teams and went from vertical to vertical. And next thing I know, I'm going horizontal across the org. And that's when I came on full time with the collective and have never looked back since.
I love that. I wonder, maybe we could talk about the collective or the AI collective. Is it called the collective or the AI collective?
We call it both.
Okay, amazing. So I always feel like it's the AI collective because I feel like you guys are famous in the AI space. Maybe we could talk about like the evolution of the first event to like, having multiple chapters. So I'll like start with Chappy because I feel like you kind of created the organization as you were building like very successful apps, and like what were some lessons that you feel like translate from building a popular consumer product to building the AI collective? Because I think the AI collective is somewhat like a consumer product itself, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it. How the first event started was this was right after ChatGPT had come out, and I have a lot of friends who have been in Silicon Valley for a very long time and been here through the internet era as well, and have told me that this is the height, the most energy that there's ever been in San Francisco right now, even more than the internet boom. And you could feel it. We could all feel it. We knew that this was something momentous. This was a paradigm shift. We were in the middle of a paradigm shift, and we just wanted to learn as much as we possibly could and surround ourselves with other spiky people who are also just as fascinated with the technology as we are. So we met up as soon as we possibly could, right after the whole like Christmas break and everything like that. This was early February. And that's where it all started. It's just in my friend Steven's cozy San Francisco living room, bringing the 12 people together around a table to discuss what's going on. Now, you bring up an interesting connection there, which is my background in consumer apps. And yeah, I've been lucky to have built a couple of very successful consumer apps back when I was young. And I would say the through line there is empathy. It's just understanding people, right? And what people want. It's you say product market fit. And I've just been very lucky in being able to understand people and product market fit and what people really want, whether it's in a homework tracking app, in a weightlifting tracking app, or in a community.
For sure. What do you think people want, by the way? So like, was it like, so I think obviously like there's so many events in SF, especially like, I was like very lucky to be like one of the judge on your most recent like pitch day. And I feel like that was like every day there's like a pitch day in SF, but like not many people kind of gather, 700 people on a Friday night to like go show up at once and then, hearing people's pitch, and then almost no one left. I feel like most people stayed throughout. So how do you keep the energy high during these kind of sessions?
Yeah. Well,
I also want to highlight that competition is so high because like in like there's like an event every hour. So like, how do you guys kind of like compete with the other stuff that are like very similar-ish?
Yeah, there's something like 100 events per month in SF, which is just wild. That's more events than we've ever had in the Bay Area. And that's really what makes the Bay Area so special, is that there is so much, I call it silo breaking and knowledge spillover, people coming together and exchanging ideas. So the core insight, what got us started with the AI Collective and how we went from 12 people signing up for the first event to 250, over 250 people signing up for the third event, is a focus on why I think everybody or many people come to events. It's to meet other people. It's to exchange insights. I went to many a networking event before we hosted our first event. And what would frustrate me is I'd go to the event. I know that there are great people around me, but I'd end up stuck in like one conversation or maybe two conversations with great people, but I'd only get to talk with one or two people. And I didn't really get to understand who else was there at the event and why we were all there. So we actually started by reading the 2-Hour Cocktail Party. If you want to host events, by the way, that is like my personal Bible by Nick Gray. It's like a New York Times bestseller on how to host a really great 2-hour cocktail party. It focuses on small things like texting people for the event, name tag, make sure you take a photo after, do icebreakers, discussion groups and stuff like that. Play the harmonica, which if you have been to any of our events, you've heard of all this stuff before. That's really what made the event so special in the beginning. And that's why we had hundreds of people signing up. We ended up scaling that same exact model to hosting, I think we did 36 discussion groups in one event. And we had hundreds of people there, and we had 12 volunteer discussion leaders. It was a blast. That's the core insight, is bringing people together to explore a shared curiosity and make sure people are actually connecting and following up after.
And
For sure.
Chappy, if I could jump into that as well. I think, we've talked a lot about SF and particularly with competition locally and, the saturation of the epicenter of AI. I think one thing that really makes a breakout moment for the collective is when we did our international rebrand, where we said, hey, we're going from the major hubs and we're actually going to be focusing on a global presence. And I think that was something that really catapulted us into a global trajectory. Because like you said, there's 100 plus events in SF. Well, now we're hosting 100 plus events around the world. And markets that people typically overlook, I think, is where we get a lot of our success as well, is by being the most local. So of course we have our signature, but then I think something that is really attributed to this global presence and omnipresence, as we like to call it, is the focus on expanding into the whole world, because the whole world needs AI as well.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I wonder, so like, how did you guys like pivot from like, because I think you two and then like some other like core hosts, they're all like, not hosts, I guess like of the AI collective members are all in SF. So how do you guys actually go global? And then like, I think to scale something like this is like very city by city, because I feel like in SF, like most of like the event that you go to is like the same group of like, I guess like very socially, I guess, very social engineers. I think the non-social ones are like at home playing board games, but I don't think they leave their house. That like,
That's a good
like
point.
social engineer. It's like the typical profile of SF. But what about like other cities? Like, how do you kind of replicate this model? And I'm curious about like, who do you feel like is I would say target user, but like the IC of the collective? Because I mean, I've met like very like, I guess like a lot of like people that are like, from different walk of life, and like, I mean, they're all in tag technically. So yeah, I don't think it's very different from each other, but I think because we live in SF, so like I feel like everybody you met is kind of like working in tag. But what about other cities? Like, what if you launch this? I'm sure they're passionate about AI, but they probably have a different level of expertise. So like, how do you kind of like filter the room, or like making sure that
Those are two really great questions, and we can go one by one. I have a lot of thoughts on both. AJ, I would love for you to tell the story on, so where we are today is we're over 100 chapters globally, 30 plus countries. AJ, I would love for you to tell the story from 10 to 100. I'll start by telling the story from 1 to 10, which is the first year in 2023, we had no concept of chapters, right? Like we were all doing this for fun. I was still doing research at Apple and then went to go start a company in between. And had never really intended for this to become nearly the scale, the ambition that it is today. We were just meeting every single week, first in living room apartments, and then at larger venues. And by the end of that first year, I think we had 200, 300 plus people coming to some of the events. But it wasn't until 2024, the second year, that we started having people visiting from out of town, visiting from New York, visiting from Miami, visiting from Boston, visiting from Seattle, saying, I love this so much. Whenever I'm in town, I come to one of these events. Can we host these in our home city? And it was, I think, April of 2024 that we opened our first chapter, which was in New York. We had a really good friend, Prithvi, in New York, who we would sit on multiple calls with every single week, answer any questions, and help to try and bring the same energy and enthusiasm and passion that we had in SF that we had been building over the past year into New York. And eventually we kind of opened the floodgates. We figured out the system, and the first year, I think I ended up flying out to 15 different cities, like all around the US and eventually around the world in Paris and Toronto, just flying to each city and helping to host that first event and get that chapter, get that community off the ground. And it was so electric to go develop a really visceral understanding of what the AI ecosystem looks like in each one of those cities. So that's how we got from 1 to 10 in 2024. AJ, I'll let you tell the story for 2025 and 100 chapters.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, if we were to relate it back to product, right, we needed to validate the market. What Chappy did is the highest level of validation, traveling around the world, identifying key pockets and bringing together people. The important part on scale here is we really started to look at it like social engineering. And I think that when we look at chapters, all it took was going from one centralized location into expanding elsewhere. And then we had the network effect where we had people that were posting on socials about the new events that they were attending or the chapters that they were kicking up, people within their networks, again, because we are now a globally distributed organization and mainly because of platforms such as LinkedIn, like we're on right now, allowed us to do that. So once we were able to get the social engineering, we identified people that were from all pockets of the world. That's the same thing. It was very organic. People wanted to take the message back to that location. And then we started to get so much demand that we actually fulfilled a system behind it, where we started to focus on, hey, what can we do as HQ to make it as easy as possible for people to reduce the barrier to entry to hosting events? So Chappy created an internal platform that I think has made a huge impact on how we host events, centralizing everything from event to member management to project management and so on and so forth. But long story short, the social engineering really came from people being visible and vocal about what they're doing. And then we started to identify, okay, what are the key markets that we need to get into? Where do we see that there's emerging markets? How do we actually create a system and IP at a HQ level that allows us to go and reduce the barrier to entry for them? And now it's something where the demand is unprecedented. And we actually had a hard time fulfilling the amount of demand that we were getting from people. So that is the scale. And then in order for us to get to the next goal, which may be 1,000 chapters, maybe more than that, it's really going to come down to our ability to scale similar to a product, right? So think of like a franchise where essentially you have to make sure that everybody is mission aligned. You have to make sure that everybody understands the same guidelines, and that we really give them the best opportunity to be able to reach into new markets.
Totally. I have like another question on this. I like totally appreciate that you guys are sharing about like how it kind of started, grew by like, you know, identifying the key pockets and then identifying like, you know, people who are like who's enthusiastic about AI. But how do you pick like the chapter leader? Because I think that kind of defines the chapter itself. Like, and then what kind of like what's the psychology behind these people? Are they just like they want to build like kind of like a presence like or leadership within their ecosystem, or like I guess like what is the like kind of like the root of like them trying to be a part of the AI collective, and then what kind of benefit can they get versus like if they just start their own like stuff in their own city? Because I've seen like a few other people started like I mean I think in each as like a person who's I just started doing an event this year myself, but it's a very I would say like dinner focused event than like just like thousands of people all show up, that kind of stuff. But I guess like when I went to different cities, I feel like in each city there's locally a group of people that's doing like events locally, and a lot of them are doing AI stuff. But I guess like how do you think about like the differentiation between like your event versus like these other chapters, or like, you know, even like in back in the days there's like startup grind. I don't know if that's still like, you know, doing like local events, but like, you know, that kind of stuff, right? So it's like other branch as well, or like brands as well.
Hey, do you want to go first? And I got a bunch more.
Yeah, Grace, you have some great questions, my friend. every question is so packed. So one thing that I think is important to call out is the focus on the mission, right? Finding mission aligned individuals in order to lead the chapters, I think is the make it or break it. So it's something that we reiterate every single time that we host an all hands, every time we have an onboarding session, we are constantly evaluating our mission. And I think it ensures that people are from the same belief and philosophy, which I think is really, really important, especially when we're focused on such a exponential and disruptive technology. So finding mission aligned people is incredibly important. And then also understanding how these people gain support in their local ecosystem. So a lot of people that are coming to us to start these chapters, they're already in, high networks. They have a lot of people who share similar mindsets, and they're able to turn this chapter into something that is a spark and scale it rather quickly. So I think it's important to identify the right individuals. And one of the questions that you asked that I think is incredibly important, which is why would somebody choose to start an AIC chapter rather than do their own thing, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with our presence. The fact that we have built a global brand. I think it also has to do with the tooling and resources that we share with people. If you were to stumble off the street and try to host events, which you know from the dinners, there's a lot of legwork that goes into that. And we've now hosted hundreds of events, closer to 1,000. And so I think the lessons that we've learned that we can codify into our system is a real big reason of why somebody would attach themselves to AIC. And I think also understanding that the gravity of the community and the support that you get when you join the AIC is incredible. And I think that's what allows people to stay there beyond just the moment of inception.
For sure. I wonder, this is like a kind of adjacent question, but like, I think like when I went to your event, I was like seeing hundreds of, like not hundreds of, let's call it like 20 volunteers. So I feel like that's like a lot of people that's like, volunteering their time, energy to do these kind of stuff, right? So what's your thought on like, the difference between like a chapter member versus like the volunteers, or like, I don't know if you call them chapter member, but like, I guess the chapter leaders. Mm-hmm. So what's the differentiation between like a chapter leader versus the volunteers? And also like, how do you quickly get all the volunteers? Is that just like posting on social media, or like how do they discover the AI collective at the beginning, basically?
AJ, go for it.
Cheers. Okay. Yeah. Very, very great question. So I would say, so we use chapter leads and chapter organizers. So that's kind of our nomenclature behind people that are on the team. One of the biggest incentives behind being a chapter lead is you are the node of your community. So we like to say that rather than attending events, you get to throw events, and therefore you are the center of gravity in your local ecosystem. So that is the pull behind being a chapter lead. There's a lot of chapter organizers that end up becoming chapter leads in different places as well. So I think the chapter organizers are there to gain experience on events and community. Typically, chapter leads have a little bit more experience, or they have a little bit higher gravitational pull in the ecosystem. But the organizers are absolutely pivotal. And the way that we're able to find them, like we said, sometimes it's pre-existing relationships, but a lot of the time it goes into having people who attend our events. And I think one of the signs of a really healthy community is when you have people who attend your events and immediately after shoot you an email or a text message, and they're like, so how can I get involved? How can I get deeper into this process? So I think it's very organic. There's some ways that we engage through social media. There's some ways that we do certain levels of messaging, but really it just comes down to people feel the energy that we create, and they want to play a part in that role. And that eventually may spread over time as well. And that we're always open for that.
What's the relationship between like a decentralized organization versus like management? Because I think like the problem is like if you are too decentralized, and then like what if people just use a brand and then spread their random message like, oh, I built an app, download this, like chapter Austin, and then like the chapter Austin people are downloading a random app. So how do you kind of like prevent that from happening?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, and it's something that we're constantly iterating on. If you go to we have FAQs for starting a chapter and joining the team as a community organizer. And one of the things we talk about is if you are a chapter lead, you are the CEO of your chapter. And we're on the Venture with Grace podcast. So sometimes I like to think of it as we're making a bet on somebody, on a founder of their local ecosystem who becomes the center of gravity for that ecosystem. And I find that the best things happen when you give really great founders a ton of control and a ton of possibility for lateral movement. You figure out what works best. You have the best sense of what your community needs. We're here to support, and we've helped to host at this point many hundreds of events and build many hundreds of chapters, but we're ultimately here to support. We have a handbook that our entire team has read and abides to that kind of talks about some of the standards that we try and hold the high bar that we set for all of our community events. And we're responsible for making sure that every chapter meets that high bar and those standards. But beyond that, it's really under the control of the chapter. And we like to give as much autonomy as we possibly can while keeping things within bounds.
And to double tap on that a bit further too, I think we have some things that are fundamental truths and we have some things that are subject to change. And I think that's any hyperscaling organization is going to experience that. So the fundamental truths are that the handbook, the resources, the mission alignment, these are things that are non-negotiable to us in the sense that everybody who comes on, all the 400, 500 volunteers that have come on board, all align with that deeply. There's a lot of things that are subject to change, especially in our industry where things are moving so fast. And so the leadership team, we're always constantly reevaluating, hey, what things can we do better? I think we're obsessed is probably the right word with the member experience and how we can make sure that everybody who's a part of it has value going back to them. And then also most importantly to the community.
For sure. I wonder, so like when you're thinking about like the growth of the organization, like, so you guys have like done different type of events, right? Like the pitch night, and then there's like, I know there, sorry. Oh my God, I'm gonna die. But so I feel like
not on the podcast.
I know exactly right here, but I wonder. So you guys are like amazing at like these like really amazing big events and stuff like that. So what is the vision for these kind of like different events? Like, so what kind of brand are you trying to establish? I know that like, you guys are investors yourself as well. Maybe we could tie into like, I guess like for the investment opportunities, I think like from bigger events, the problem is like, it's really hard to filter the people, right? There's like, I think it's a bigger funnel. So like, I'm sure like the top people and then also the entry level people, everybody all came. But the problem is like, how do you quickly filter like which one would be investing potential versus like, obviously, I also want to give a shout out to the entire experience of the pitch night. I was like, wow, I was like so impressed because it was there's the technology component of like people voting when they're like sitting in the background, like, or like sitting in the audience, and then they can vote like who gets the prize. And then also like, the judges, like we are also voting. And then obviously it was like a quite surprise that like everybody voted the same guy. But I guess like, how do you guys think about like designing the whole experience from like a event perspective, also from deal sourcing perspective as well?
Well, the organization always has been and always will be fundamentally inclusive. We're mission driven to start. You've heard us say that many times so far. If you really want to develop a good understanding of our mission, there's plenty of content on our website. There's a founding perspective, a big manifesto that you can go read, and we have 9 core beliefs you can go read on our website. There's a lot you can dig into there. And if we want to most align with our mission, we are, as a necessity, fundamentally inclusive. There you go. Thank you, AJ, for showing the website. We are fundamentally inclusive. Now, that's not always possible. I told you by our third event, even we faced this challenge of we had over 250 people signing up for a 20-person event. And that's what forced us to look at larger venues, finding ways to bring in more people and continue to create a more inclusive organization. Now, we are continuing to do that in SF or maybe the Bay Area, let's say more broadly, as a case study here, where we actually have, I think at this point, 8 to 10 chapters just in the Bay Area. So we can continue to be as inclusive as possible while also having events like our demo nights, like our pitch nights, which do get a little more exclusive. And certainly when we do private dinners, those get exclusive as well.
Yeah. One thing from our perspective, it's not just about having people in the room. It's about having the right people in the room and thinking about how those micro engagements take place. It really is similar to social engineering. We know that if we bring X amount of personas and X amount of people in, what are those conversations that will take place? Because those are the memories that people remember when they come out of the event, right? It's not necessarily, hey, what was the stage like, or what was the background on the curtains, but it's who did I meet, what relationships can I foster, and what can I do next? And then something you touched on, which is really interesting, which is for deal flow. And particularly when it comes to our pitch nights, our demo nights, we have a heavy founder presence. And in fact, the top three biggest you asked about the ICPs earlier. I would say that our top three are founders, investors, and developers and engineers. And so I think part of the global presence is we're able to identify a lot of startups that are in emerging markets that may otherwise be undiscovered and allow them to come into our signature circuits, which is like our SF in New York, and get them great access to investors in the room. So I think that's a hugely important thing is as we continue to scale globally, we branch out further and further around the world and we can really start to have heavy signal for the startups. And I think also too, part of this as well is that I think we do an incredible job at picking tastemakers, right? In the sense that I think people have been to a lot of events. They know what's a great outcome and what's not. And we always try to have the best experience. So I think it goes back to obsession.
For sure. I want to also give a highlight to all the amazing partners that you guys have partnered with. So maybe we could start with like, I think nowadays, like, I feel like just speaking from the SF experience is like, there's so many tech company around here, and how do you kind of like build a system to like make sure that like the partner discover you, and then also to talk to the right person, and then like what would you say are like the partners like goals to like kind of like collaborate a partner like AI Collective to make sure that like they whether distribute their product or like their brand to like the community, but also like on the other hand like the community can benefit, or like I guess like you guys are also running as a organization, right? So like it's like everybody has to pay like a salary and all that kind of stuff. So how do you kind of like start the partnership initiative, and like how do you kind of like platformize it or like systemize your initiatives?
AJ, this is all you.
Cheers. No, this is my bread and butter. So I love this. Funny stat that I think most people who are listening will not believe is that we have never done an outbound motion for partners. Every single partner that we've ever worked with has come to us because they recognize the ability to orchestrate the community and have deeper level insights. So that when I first came into the collective, I could not believe it. I was like, are you serious? The fact that it's just the gravitational pull, it's so organic. I love it. And great questions too about how do we ensure that the partner experience is top notch. I think it starts with proper discovery. So understanding what are the key goals that the partner wants to achieve. For example, do they want to be able to showcase a product? Are they looking for thought leadership? They want to exchange insights. Are they looking to cultivate relationships with certain founders or investors in the community? So I think we always strive to do right by the partners and make sure that they get what they want out of it, but then also that it coincides with our community. And I think one thing that we are very bullish on is that trust is eroding within institutions. And that is why the presence of communities are becoming more important day by day. And I think that a lot of partners are coming to us because they want to have more humans involved in the process and they want to hear the perspectives and feedback. And in fact, without naming names, there's a couple major partners that we've worked with that have really said, hey, we want to branch out into a new audience. And we think that our technology is great for people across the board. It's not just for developers and SF, but we think like a global audience would appreciate this technology. And so we have to always toe that line between making sure that the partners are upheld and they get what they want out of the experience, but then also too making sure that it's aligned with our community values, because that's how we are able to maintain such a great reputation.
For sure. I want to give a quick highlight to the SF AI Fest. Maybe we could talk about like, how you guys kind of come up with that. I feel like that's kind of equivalent to the Tech Week ish. Maybe we could talk about like the SF AI Fest. Like, why do you guys decided to start this, and then like what it is to the audience who may not be like super familiar with it yet.
AJ, go for it.
Cheers. Okay. So the SFAI Fest is actually materializing into something so much larger than what it was originally intended to be. So originally SFAI Fest was for marquee events that were in San Francisco. It was the most premium version of the AIC that we've ever created. We quickly realized that, hey, could we actually take the energy of an SF Tech Week and bring this worldwide so that everybody could experience this? So what originally started as a couple key marquee events, which is fantastic, we've now expanded into a global activation. So our goal is we're actually delaying the timeline on this in order to ensure that every single chapter around the world participates. And again, giving it the global presence. The reason and logic behind this was that there's a lot of organizations that can have marquee events, right? There's no shortage of conferences. There's no shortage of major keynotes. However, how many communities around the world can orchestrate hundreds of thousands of people in the course of a week across every single continent? And I think that is something that is more historic. And that is why we're delaying it, is to do something that actually has a massive impact that's never been done before. And as all good things that have never been done before, there's always challenges that come with it. But that's the best part of the upside, right? It's like the thesis here is that, can we activate a global community within a very short time frame and give everybody the top-notch experience of what you would expect from a tech week?
For sure.
Yeah, so lots more exciting news on that in the new year.
Yes. Yeah, but we won't be quiet.
I wonder, when you guys are thinking about, I guess, like creating an event ecosystem. So like, I think you guys have done like these really big ones about like, it's the same type of people who would go to a dinner, to go to the conference, to go to like the pitch night and everything else? Or like, how do you guys think about like the, I wouldn't say funnel, but like it's kind of like an ecosystem, right? Or like a circle of, I guess like the is that like the life cycle of the user, or like how do you guys like that?
Ecosystem, it's a buzzword, but it's also a very accurate term. And we think a lot about how do we create ecosystems for individual cities, but then what is the entire global AI collective ecosystem work? Okay, I'll use another SF buzzword, which is network effects, right? How do we make sure that there are network effects both within a city and then all around the world? And there is no one event fits all. And you specifically mentioned, okay, what is like the ecosystem of events? There's no one event fits all. You're not going to have the most connection to your community by just attending conferences or exclusively going to dinners or only going to demo nights. There's value in each one of those, and each one of those strengthens the aggregate community and your own individual experience as a member. So we think about, what is the complementarity of all these different event types, event formats, and then also the network effects all around the world.
Double tap on all around the world. This is the toughest thing. If we're just talking about what does SF need, we could probably fit that within a couple of key event formats. But then when you're branching out across, 100,000 plus builders and 100 plus chapters, every ecosystem is a little bit different. And it goes back to that earlier thing that we talked about, which is how much of it is decentralized versus centralized. And I think that we have definitely put a lot of thought into the event formats, but they're really the ability to be curated dependent upon the local ecosystem. And again, we go back and we pick the right people, we pick the mission aligned people who understand their ecosystem, and then give them the tools to be able to activate it.
I wonder from like, I guess like the, I wouldn't say monetization, but like, I guess like to funding the whole community perspective. So for example, let's say, when the event in like a different city, like, so is everybody have to raise their own money to host their own event, or like that's a collective are gonna like kind of centralize that part to, for example, when you bring in a partner and then the partner covers like the cost from like the city or a different city, or how does that kind of like play into the kind of like management ecosystem?
Go for it.
I'll say two things. First off, we were really lucky, first and foremost, to get a $10 billion donation from Sam Altman, which really helps with the finances. And the second thing I'll say is, if you're curious about how do we actually make the finances work across the chapters, you come and give us a call and find out what it is that we do at the collective.
Oh my God.
PR train, baby. Come on.
Oh my God. Okay, so let's talk about the AI trends, right? So like you guys are on the ground, like hanging out with a lot of founders and investors and engineers. Like, what are some AI trends that you feel like will be your thing in 2026?
Mhm. Well, both AJ and I are scouts, so we also have a venture angle to this. But AJ, I'll let you go first.
Oh man, there's so many. There's so many. I would say there's some of the bets that I'm very bullish on, and then there's some verticals I'm very bullish on. So I think going back to the thesis of the collective, I think we're very bullish on human connection. And this can take place inside of verticalized apps, but just as a general thesis, I believe that as everything becomes more digitized and as intelligence becomes extremely accessible and the cost of intelligence drops to zero, I think the cost of trust goes through the roof. So I think we're going to see more people. We're already starting to see some trends of going back to analog. We're seeing people that are focused on human connections and going face to face. I think we'll continue to see that emergence, almost as a counterculture to mass digitalization. That's something that I'm always keeping my eye on. I would say other trends that we're seeing is hyper-personalization at scale, something that I'm super passionate about. So the ability for AI to ingest thousands of data points and come up with a completely unique experience to every user, no matter what the vertical is, I think is something that's really interesting. And I would say the last one that I find to be very interesting is disruptive tech. In particular, I love disruptive technology. I think that healthcare and education is two specific verticals there. There's a lot of optimizations that can take place with AI, and I think we are just beginning to scratch the surface of what AI companies are able to do for these industries. So I'm very curious to see what else comes out of here. I'll kick it over to Chappy, and I'm sure there's more that'll come.
Yeah. Well, the cop out answer would be agents, and it's been agents for a little while, right? I think the more moving to the application layer is something I'm interested in, like very vertical specific, maybe even things that might traditionally be sub venture scale. Also, just small teams continuing to leverage themselves up. I think it's going to be a really interesting new world again of like sub venture opportunities with people being able to build, prototype, and then build more quickly than ever before. And then also building through things like Lovable and Cursor and Windsurf being democratized in a way that we've never seen before. Anybody can go build software. Go look at my favorite analogy to this, and I think it's a pretty sturdy one, is go look at the market for media a few decades ago. And now you look at the market for media now, and you have millions of influencers who are all making a living off of the content they produce, including us here right now. That would have been unfathomable. And that's really like the democratization of creativity. The same thing is happening in software. And it's really been a trend for a while that software is easier to create. It's easier to distribute. And thus, I think you're going to have more and more people entering this awesome world, building great niche products. And maybe that, again, maybe to kind of wrap it up, that's sub-venture scale, but that's where I think there is exciting room for innovation in the innovation economy at large.
The era of micro SaaS.
Oh, wow. The micro SaaS, that's a new thing.
Micro SaaS, yes.
Yeah. Happy to, one thing I think is really interesting too is speed, right? We talk about it a lot with investments is like, what's your speed to deploy in the market and how can that be a defensible moat? And the last thing I'll say that, because Chappy, you started to touch on a little bit, is like I'm so fascinated to see how can small teams have outsized returns and productivity as compared to incumbents, and particularly with enterprise sales. Something that's like with my background is like I'm very curious to see how the enterprise sales cycle is something that typically takes such a long period of time. You have to go through all of the different proof points and pilots and whatever else. And we're seeing a lot of small teams being able to just jump right in, beat out incumbents because they can iterate same day. They go and they talk to an investor, they get feedback on their product, they're able to make those changes. Next day, send out the updated MVP, and boom, there you go. And it just shows that it's really going to be about hustle, grit, and speed, in my opinion. That technical moat's going to decrease, and it's really going to be who can listen to the user, who can get in the right rooms, and who can iterate as fast as possible.
Yeah. Grace, I have to jump off just a tad bit early. You guys go ahead and finish the conversation. I enjoyed this so much, and thanks to everybody who attended. All right. Take care.
See you, Chappy.
Okay, so last question-ish. So like one thing is like, I think a lot of people or like a lot of founders are like trying to build their own like distribution for their SaaS or like micro SaaS. Like, how do you think about like, for example, I'm sure you've seen people in the community probably promoting their own the stuff that they're building, whether it's like on stage at the pitch night or like online. So like, how do you think about like building a distribution in San Francisco these days, like to sell your SaaS?
Yeah, distribution is everything, right? And we can point to a couple examples of where there's distribution prior to product. Right? Like, bless you. For example, we're not gonna name names, but I think you can know who I'm talking about. People that have built a lot of hype, a lot of distribution, and you don't quite know what the product is. I think we're gonna see that more and more. The era of storytelling in media, I think, is so underrated. And this is, again, just something that I'm very bullish about, which is that everybody talks about AI slop, right? And the ability for AI to output at a massive scale. That means that people that have true taste in storytelling and are able to have like compelling narratives have a huge advantage because they're going to be 1 in a million in terms of content that's online. And the best advice that I give to somebody who's looking to build distribution is think about building for your audience first before going elsewhere. And in particular, one thing that we did with the collective that I believe was the right bet was before we ever thought about monetizing, and we still have not monetized. Everything is free. Every single event to attend is free. We don't charge members anything. We've been building this now for 3 years and we have not monetized because we're so obsessed with building the distribution engine. So that way, whenever monetization does come in the form of an app, product, whatever, you have that built in. And I think we're seeing the same thing with a lot of new media fellowships. We're seeing the focus that both on investment and on the startup side that people are really doubling down on media as distribution. And I would continue to make that bet 9 out of 10 times.
I wonder when it comes to like, I guess like from the collectives, like different events and stuff, like what are, I guess like what would you say is like the way that for people to stay engaged? Because I think like the other problem is like after you host something really huge and like how do people just like keep engaging with each other after they leave? Or like do you guys, use like a newsletter? I mean, obviously you have a newsletter, but maybe we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Great question. More info coming soon. I hate to tease something. Great things coming soon. Today, what you're able to do is after you attend events, you can join in the Slack where you're able to communicate with thousands of people in real time. You can also go via newsletter where we publish 3 times a week to all of our member audience. Those are the best ways to stay engaged, but there is a phenomenal solution coming through the pipeline that allows people to be omnipresent and omni-engaged that we'll be happy to share more about later.
Love that. I wonder, last question maybe. What would you say is like, I guess like one insight that you have learned from being at the collective and like, yeah. That's
okay. This is my number one insight. Try to learn the difference between building for AI and building for humans. And I'll explain what I mean by this. You can have the best systems engineer in the world. You can build the best products hand down. But if you over-index on tech and you under-index on humanity, you won't be effectively solving problems. And the context behind this is that when it comes to being able to distribute new features to our platforms or being able to add new products internally that our team can use, the thing that always beats it is just getting face-to-face, especially in one-to-many conversations, and really listening to your user or your human about what they need. And I think that this, it actually has a parallelism into being a founder, which is that, be obsessed with the problem, don't be obsessed with the solution. So for example, like as you roll out new features and you roll out new product, make sure that you're always thinking about your end user at the end of the day and be obsessed with solving their problems and not obsessed with the current form factor for the way that you're solving those problems, if that makes sense. And I think that's a very, especially in the SF, in the tech bubble, and you hear startup pitches all day long as well. There's so many people who come in and are like, oh, I got the best tech stack. We're able to solve, X amount of latency or X amount of blah, 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 whatever the technical merit is. And I always ask, like, okay, that's phenomenal, but how is that actually changing users' lives? Well, how is this actually effectively solving the problem? And is this a hypothesis that you have about being able to solve the problem for the user, or do you have actual testimonials? Are you listening to the user every day? And so same thing applies to a community and I never would have expected it to apply to a community, but the same thing applies. We roll out something new. Okay, get in front of the people. How is this helping you? Is this actually solving the problem that you're looking for? If so, double down. If not, pivot and keep going.
Love that. Okay, so I want to wrap with like a quick 1-minute fire round. What's your favorite book?
Favorite book, 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who did I invite to the dinner party? Who would I invite you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which go next week. Bye.
Period. Okay. There you go.
Yes. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Rick Tursky.
Where can we find you outside of work?
You can find me on out of work.
Outside of work, yeah.
Is that a thing? Does that exist? Find me in the gym.
It's not a question for SF people.
Yeah. Find me in the gym. Find me with my wife.
Yeah, love that. Well, thank you so much, AJ, for coming on the show today. Same as Chappy, who had something else. But anyway, such a great conversation, as always.
Yeah, pleasure as always. And I look forward to chatting with you soon. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Really appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Let me